Part of my training every day is getting into the core. I don't always load those muscles with weight and speed, but I always do a little bit of activation. It's important to get those muscles working. They're the core, they're stabilizers, they control all the movement, they look nice. And so when I do my core workout, I always get into the front muscles, the abs, the hip flexors, the back muscles like the erectors and the glutes, and then of course the side muscles as well, like our obliques. So follow along, check out what I do. Exercise 1 is called a V-snap, and for this one you're going from laying on your back. Hopefully that low back is flat into the ground when you're on your back, and then you're snapping up as quick as you can up onto your butt, bringing everything up, only butt is on the ground, into that V position, and then back down and repeat. So I'll show a few reps here. So again, making sure that low back is flat, pressed into the ground. Some people find it very tricky to get their feet all the way down, and so if you want to not let your feet go all the way down and just give about 10 centimeters of space between each rep, that's fine too. The arms above are staying by the ears, trying to reach for the floor. So this is our position 1. This is our position 2 up here at the top, which is that V, trying to touch the feet, again keeping the ears squeezed. So remember, that low back stays flat into the ground as I come down. Maybe I can't get my feet and my hands both to touch the ground. I'm trying to, but if I'm losing my core engagement and that compression, or I'm losing that low back pressure into the floor, then I've opened too far. So I have to play that fine line, and that works my core muscles in this interesting way where the muscles are contracting, but they're also being stretched. Exercise 2 is the hollow body rock. And so what makes a hollow body position is that we have this nice round, my chest is incurved, as you can see, almost like the shape of a boat. My whole body's trying to have this nice curve shape, and I want to rock it, rocking it like a boat. What we don't want to see on a hollow body rock is this, piking in the hips, arching, ribs coming out. Okay? We don't want to see sitting up right off the low back completely. If I'm sitting up all the way like this, obviously I got a little bit of pike here, because again, a hollow means I have no bending in my hips. My hips are actually straight. It's all up here in my chest that's round. And so again, hollow rock, ears are squeezed, low back's into the ground. And it's just a small rock. It doesn't need to be up, big like this. It's about the shape. And really, if you feel like it's quite strong, I want you to push it with speed. How fast can you fire off reps? But always focusing on the shape. Even a little bit of sucking into the stomach, and I like to do this exercise with the shirt off so I can actually see what my abs look like. If I start to see the middle starting to bulge out, or that my ribs are coming out, I don't have that round shape, then again, I'm training my core a little bit incorrectly, because I'm not getting into those deep muscles that I want to see working. And so make sure the position is really nice. At first, when you start doing this exercise, it's going to be survival, right? You're trying to get at 30 reps in, and you're just fighting. Once you start doing it for a few weeks, it starts to get easier, and then you can start, like I said, firing off that speed, tightening your position, trying to squeeze your butt cheeks, lock your knees out, point your toes, push really tall in your body, and starting to not survive, but now you're thriving, and you can really play with it and feel quick and strong and in control. So that's a gradual progression, and you'll find that improve over time, and it feels quite good once you have that strength to make it through in the fun way. Exercise number 3 for the core is what I like to call hollow snaps. And so now, same hollow position, and this is very similar to the position 1 of the V-snap in the way that we're trying to get the heels to touch the ground at the same time that our hands touch the ground. We're trying to get both touching, but again, we don't want to lose this compression. So you see I have my hand on the top of my rib cage, and then my hand at my waistline of my pants. And when I crunch my stomach muscles, I can close that shape. I can get it really, really close. As you can see here, it's like 10 centimeters. So I want to keep that compression while I'm doing quick action, trying to reach hands and feet to the floor. And that's why it's called a snap, right? I call it a hollow snap, because we're keeping the hollow shape, but we're trying to snap it open as quick as we can. So I'll show you an example of this here. With this one too, if it's not strong and you start to really fire it open and you feel this is opening, then you have to either squeeze harder or not push the arms and legs so far, but find a spot where the muscles feel like they're ripping open, but the change in the body shape is not happening. So here, I wish I could have my full body in the shot here, but I'll do the best I can do. So I'm in my hollow shape here. Now watch, my body's trying not to change. Now, of course, it will have a little bit of change to it. That's important. But we always have to be fighting against that change as much as possible. And so this is an interesting exercise in the way that we're trying to create a counter to the action, right? Everything's trying to open while the abs are trying to close. This is an example of active flexibility of the core muscles, because the core is being activated to contract, but we're getting a stretching happening. And because it's contracting as we stretch it, it's like, you know, pushing your hand into something and pulling it away while you're pushing, and you let it go and you create that snap action. So it creates this usable kind of core energy instead of just, you know, opening up the body but losing that tummy tightness in the first place. So this exercise is tricky, takes a lot of focus, and it might start off as being just little movements. Soon you can start to really reach back and start to add speed and explode or weights. But the most important thing is that the shape is there, and we're trying not to have much change at all in our core, in our hollow. The hollow doesn't change, just the hips and the shoulder joint move. Finally, I just wanted to give a few additional notes on the hollow body, right? So the hollow body is used throughout the V-snap, really at that first position of the V-snap. Throughout all the hollow rocks, throughout the hollow snap, we want this hollow body, right? And we understand it's this general curve, but there's some finer details to it. And so what we want to do with the hollow body is we want to create the tightness of a body line where everything from the tip of the toe right to the tip of the fingers connects force. And so if I push down on the hands, the whole body will come up as one line, right? We're looking for that rigidity. The best ways to do this are, of course, making sure that you have a nice tight leg, a nice toe point. This whole line of the leg is squeezed really hard. Okay, we don't want it to be loose. We don't want to forget about the toes. We always want to feel the whole tight line. The next thing, which is in the hips, and I think is probably, if not the most, one of the most important parts of the hollow body shape, and that's squeezing the butt. Why we squish the butt cheeks together. And this is like we're squeezing the butt in a way like we're holding something in our butt cheeks. Okay, we're trying to squeeze the butt together, and what that does is it gets rid of any of this bending that we could have in our hips, any piking. When we squeeze the butt, it's impossible to pike. And of course, if you're piked, it's impossible to squeeze the butt. And so when we get the butt tucked in, we want to try to make our butt as small as possible. Then we connect the legs, the lower body, to the upper body, and it creates this nice transfer of force. The butt has to be squeezed. Core or tummy, we talked enough about. Up into the chest, what we're looking for in a hollow body is not so much that the body's rounding forward in this plane, but more the shoulders are crunching in this top plane down. If you're looking at me, the top of my head, right? I look like an upside down letter U, or like a nice curved letter N. This is what makes a hollow shape. Okay, it's on this plane, looking down at the top of my head. So we want to make sure that the chest is pinched in. We're trying to squeeze the pec muscles together. We're trying to make the shoulders try to touch together, I guess is a good way to look at it too. That's an important piece to the hollow that we can think about while we're doing all these exercises as well. And then the last piece is shoulders touching the ears. This is another important piece. It's very important in the same way that squeezing the butt was important, right? Squeezing the butt locked in the hips so that what happens in the legs is locked and transfers force nicely without losing any energy from the legs into the core. What putting the shoulders by the ears does is the same thing, but it locks in the energy from the core to the arms, right? And so we want to get rid of any of these cracks in the movement or weak spots in our shape. So we squeeze the ears, we get a nice tight chest, tummy tight, butt is squeezed, and we want to just squeeze everything as tight as we can. Full extension, long but beautiful, okay? Work on the hollow shape. A lot of guys I see do not the best hollow shape, and they fire off a ton of reps, and they don't get the same strength. It doesn't help their gymnastics, and they don't get the same physique from it. They put in the time, but they don't get the same output as the person who really focuses on the shape, puts the best effort in to have the position just right. That kind of gymnast or that kind of person who's doing exercises will get the biggest benefit from their training. And so be mindful, think about your body, always scan while you're doing these exercises. it's, I think, important too to just work on the hollow body shape without rocking, without snapping, without doing any actions like that, just to feel it, all right? All right, now the next area of the core, we did the front, now we'll get to the back. So core exercise, or I guess let's say back exercise number 1 is what I like to call end range hip extension, right? And so what we're trying to do here is 2 things. We want to take our hips into end range, but we also want to isolate that we're extending through the hips. And so when we look at this area, and a lot of times in gymnastics, we can see it as just one joint, right? We're either arched or we're not. But there's really so many joints here, but we break it down into what we call our low back joints, which is our lumbar vertebrae, a little bit of sacrum, that lumbosacral joint as well. There's that can extend, and then there's our actual hip joint which extends, which is how the femur, this whole leg bone, sits into the pelvis. And so that joint where the leg bone sits into the pelvis is the one that we're trying to isolate here. And so the best way we can do this and we can eliminate extending through the low back is by activating our core and trying to keep our core, see my back here, as round as possible. I have that nice round gymnast back. My tummy's tight. If I'm in this shape here, then there's a pretty good chance that my low back is protected and I haven't dumped into my low back and let my tummy drop and my ribs come out. So we hit this shape. I like to get up into my elbows. The reason I'm getting up is so that I'm hitting that end range. I'm trying to get as high up as I can. Some guys will do it up all the way up here. I don't necessarily do that because my hip extension is not quite that good. And so you find where you can get that hip extension to your end range while keeping the core engaged. Okay, and so here's my shape here, up on my elbows. My tummy's tight, my core is engaged. And now what I'm trying to do here on this exercise is my hip bone, that front hip bone there, we call it ASIS, but it's that bony thing that your pants try to sit on top of. We're trying to push that into the floor, okay? We're trying to dig that into the floor without letting the tummy drop, okay? So the tummy stays in as we push the hips into the floor. This is isolating that hip extension. Core is staying tight. When you're doing this one correctly, you won't be able to get the legs up too much because you're already at end range, of course, but also it's just the hip joint doesn't naturally want to move as easy as the low back does. And so if we're dumping into the back, we've let our tummy drop and we're lifting this way, look, we can get quite a bit, but that's not isolating what we want to here. When we're doing this one correctly, we're not feeling it in the back, we're feeling it in the butt. And like I said, maybe we're only getting 5 centimeters of lift. That's totally okay. So here we fire this exercise off. I like to do it nice and quick, but the tummy stays tight, the knees don't bend. Okay, as I lift here, I'm not bending in the knees. My knees are trying to lock out as straight as they can. And just firing off those reps here, you'll feel it in the butt, you'll feel it in the legs, you'll feel it in really everywhere, maybe even a little bit in the core, but you shouldn't feel it in the low back. Okay, this is called end range hip extension. Very important part to our back core. So back exercise from the back core, number 2, very similar to number 1, except now we're not going into, we're not starting in the end range position. Now we're trying to take ourselves into a long handstand position, okay? And so for the first exercise, I was up here. I was trying to get as high as I can. Like I said, some guys came up this high to get that action. Now what I'm trying to do is get down into a handstand position, basically like I'm holding a handstand. Okay, my armpits are pushing into the floor, my back is round, and then most importantly, my hands are reaching as far as they possibly can. Now, everything else on this exercise is the exact same as exercise 1. My tummy's staying tight. I'm trying to keep my ribs off the ground, my back round, and I'm trying to isolate just the butt muscles and that where the leg bone meets my pelvis, that hip joint. Okay, I'm not dumping into my back. I'm not lifting up. See that back arching? No, I'm keeping my tummy in. And I'm squeezing my butt. And I'm working the hip extension, not the low back extension. That's exercise 2. Now we have our final exercise, exercise 3 of the back core. Now we've done so much focus into hip extension, and the reason for that is that the low back's not a area that we want to have a lot of motion through. We want it to be quite stable. And so these exercises, number 1 and 2, focus on keeping the low back lumbar area stable, not doing a lot of motion. For this third piece, we can now allow some back extension to happen. This is what we call arch rocks, or sometimes people will call it a Superman rock. Just like the hollow rock, except now we're flipped onto our stomach and we're opened up the other way. Okay? So here's my arch shape. I'll move forward a little bit. Okay? Here's my arch shape, and I'm rocking. Now, while you're doing this one, it's not, what I want to be focused on is that initial feeling that we did on exercise number 1 and 2 of core being tight and hip being open, pressing those hip bones into the floor. Once we have that butt tight and the hips extended, then we can start to build up our height and begin to extend through the back. I guess the big thing is that our hips need to create all the motion they can first before the low back starts to kick into gear, not the other way around. This is called an arch rock, and just like our hollow rock, we want to keep a nice line. So we want to have our shoulders by our ears, so force transmits from the core to the arms. We want to have our butt squeezed, like I just talked about, being so important. And again, so that our force from our legs can transfer nicely into our core. We want to have the hips open and extending so that we're protecting our low back, and also we're keeping good strength. Just like I had talked about on the core exercise, if its muscles are tight and we create that action against it, it creates a nice snap. Same thing goes with our arch. If my tummy's tight and my hips are opening, I have a tight arch position. It's a lot tighter than sometimes we see that tummy drop and the body gets loose and weak, and we can also do injury to the low back. Okay, low back area is very unstable because all we have is the spine there. Everything else is just soft tissue, internal organs. So keeping the core tight in the front is very important to balance that area. So arch rock, exercise number 3. All right, now we go into the final aspects of the core, which is the side line. Okay, now these exercises I'm going to show are going to apply to both your left and your right side. I'm only going to explain them on one side because it's really the exact same on both sides, of course, right? And so exercises, the big thing to understand here, I'm going to take this camera here so we can see a little bit better. With the core, the side core exercises, we're going to be focusing on, of course, maybe I'll show it from the front here quick. Of course, trying to get our body crunching. See, I brought my shoulders up, my feet are coming up a little bit, and I'm trying to crunch this area in. That's a very important aspect. We want to work those muscles and contract them. But while we're doing that, there's 2 variations that I want to see from looking at me from this view. And that is hips open. Okay, hips open, so I'm a little bit in an arch, I guess you could say, in the hips while I crunch. And hips hollow, closed as I crunch. Okay, we want to work both, and we also want to work our ability to pop between both. And so the first exercise that I do, make sure you guys see, is with hips open. Okay, now just hips. I exaggerated that motion by opening my chest, but I want to keep my chest in, my tummy tight, and just my hips open. Okay, and now while I'm in this open hip position, tummy tight, hollow chest, I'm going to start with exercise 1, which is crunches. I'm trying to lift my shoulders up at the same time as I lift my feet up, and my side of my body by my ribs. My ribs are basically trying to touch my hip bone, my pelvis, with each crunch. All right, that's exercise 1. Exercise 2 is exactly that, except now in that position that was open, I'm now pulling it into a hollow, incurve, slightly incurved position. And I'm trying that same action, that crunch, trying to touch ribs to hips. This one, in that incurve position, you'll most likely feel is a little bit harder, okay? I like to practice both of these. Side core exercise number 3 and 4. Again, we have 2 here because they're the exact same thing, except one is done with the hips in a slightly open position and one's done with the hips in a slightly closed position. 1 and 2, we are doing kind of crunches, I guess you could call them, or snaps. Now we're going to be doing rocks. Okay, so I'm on my side here. My hips are open, my core is tight, my hollow chest, but my hips are, if I turn a bit here, you can see, I'm trying to lift this up like an arch rock position. My butt's tight. And I'm just gonna rock myself. I'm using this arm. Let me move over here. I'm using this arm to push myself a little bit here. You can also bring the arm up and push with this arm in front. It doesn't really matter. You can use your arms as much as you want on this one, because our goal is to create a nice rock while we keep our body as crunched as it can be in that side crunch position. We'll do the same thing open, and then we'll close our body into a hollow side rock position, and we'll repeat that same action. While we're doing this one, the same thing. Ribs are trying to touch the hips. We're trying to get that to touch, and when you're doing it correctly, you're gonna feel a big cramp into the side of the torso here, which is those obliques muscles and maybe even a little bit of the serratus, especially if we got this arm up like this, and we're trying to keep everything tight right up to the lat and serratus muscle, which is up here. So that's that. Final exercise, side core exercise number 5. Lots of side core exercise variations. Really it's 3, but they just, like you know, there's an open variation and a closed variation. For this 5th one, we're hopping between open and closed. And so I like to call these swishes. But maybe we'll get a better view here of my legs. So what's happening here is I'm going from my side crunch with hips open, and I'm trying to roll into my side crunch with hips closed, hollow. Arch, hollow, arch, hollow, arch, hollow. And I'm not losing my maximum side crunch. Now it looks like my legs are going and doing a U, but I'm not trying to. I'm trying to keep my feet up just the same level and just hop between open to close. But naturally what happens is we get a little bit of a swish or a swoop happening as we change positions. But this one's important because we're hopping between that open position and closed position, which is a very important shaping piece of gymnastics. We see it happen on P-bars, high bar, pommel horse. This sort of shape change is very important. It's also very corrective. Sometimes we find our body to be open on a skill, and we have to have the core ability to make that change, to have the strength to make the change, but also to have the coordination to feel and make the change. And so that's why I include this movement pattern into my core workout every day. All right, and so now we're gonna run through the set in real-time speed, the entire thing, starting with our V-snaps. I'm gonna do 20 V-snaps in a row. Notice the extension through the knees, the toe point. This is not just an ab exercise, but it's hip flexors, quads, you know, the whole body line, every little muscle is going into it, but believe it or not, there's a lot of hip flexors. So we finish those 20 V-snaps, trying to snap up as quick as we can, and then it's on into our 30 hollow rocks. So here you can see that nice hollow shape, still really good butt squeeze, knee extension, toe point. And I'm not doing a big hollow rock, it's just these nice little small ones with good speed and good position. That speed is what will give that burn. So here we keep going, we fight to fire through those 30, and then it's onto the hollow snaps. Here's those hollow snaps. I'm really struggling there, but I'm trying to push to keep the core. 10 quick hollow snaps, and I like to finish with a quick V-snap up. Then we roll on to our front, and here I'm getting that core locked in and trying to focus on just the tight butt hip extension, pressing those hip bones into the floor, full knee extension, and we're gonna fire off 20 of those end range hip extensions. Now we go into 20 long hollow hip extensions, same thing, tight knees, core tight, and then finish off the set with 10 arch body rocks. Only 10, but good position. Nice knee extension, really make sure the knees are straight is so important. And there's those 10. Then we're on to our side set here. Nice quick side crunches. Here's my hip open variation. Knees are tight, that arm is tight by my side. I've engaged my lat. Now I pop into hollow, and I'm gonna fire off 30 reps in the hollow side crunch. 30 of both these side crunch open and close variation reps. Then we move on to open hip side rock. We're going to do 10 reps of these, keeping that nice form, and then on to our side rocks in the hollow variation. Same thing, 10 rocks. The hollow version is a lot harder. Now we're swishing back and forth from hip open to hip closed, side crunch. We're pushing it, we're trying to crunch as much as we can. You'll probably be feeling it into the groin and hip adductors as well there. Now we move into our opposite side here, and we're doing those open hip side crunches. I have that arm by my side, and I'm trying to pinch my ribs into my hip bone. Now I get more hollow, hip closed variation, 30 reps here. Fire them off. Trying to focus on tight legs too. I don't want my feet to come apart. Really squeezing, it's hard. Now we got our hip open rocks happening here, keeping my body crunched. Now we got our hip closed rocks, 10 of those. Now my swishes back and forth to finish off the set, 10 times, nice and tight. So as you can see, this whole set takes less than 3 minutes to complete. There you have it. It's a quick set, as difficult as you choose to make it. At first, like I said, it can be a matter of survival. Just get through. Bend your knees if you need to, but keep that low back engaged on the hollow rocks, for example. Find a way to modify, but get through. As the strength comes, you can really start to push it. And what I mean by push it is put the timer on and see how fast you can get through firing off all those reps. Maybe you can do it in less than 2 minutes with some good speed. Another challenge is adding ankle weights and a dumbbell over your head for your arms and trying to complete the set with weights. That's a way we can load it. Speed and weights, I think it's good to balance with a little bit of both, especially when you've hit that mode where without weights is too easy already to get through. And do a nice balance. So with the exercise, most of your day should be no weights, just run through the exercise, but there could be the odd day where you go, you know what, I really want to challenge it. 1 or 2 days a week where you say, okay, let's pop some ankle weights on and hold a dumbbell, or let's put myself on the clock and see how quick I can get through the set. But do it every day, 3 minutes, and you won't be disappointed. Peace, guys.